That would be good.
There we
Okay,
go. Can you hear me
perfect.
now? Thank you all. Recording has started. Good afternoon, everyone. I've got 12 p.m. Central Time on my side, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Ian Preston. I serve as the chair of the Young Professionals in Transportation, our Nashville chapter. We are a 501c3 nonprofit with chapters across the country in most states and some internationally, focused on networking and bringing to light excellent case studies of transportation planning, engineering, design to our young planners, professionals, and seasoned veterans in the profession and fields. We host monthly events. If you're here today, you've joined us for one of our more formal events, which features a panel of experts in our field who join to answer questions about hot topics in our realm. Today, we'll be focusing on multimodal projects through the lens of good practices in public engagement. And we are joined by some excellent panelists today. Really appreciate their time. I'm going to introduce them. No need to respond, but just they will, in their responses, give some more background about what they do. So here we go to get started. First, we have Matthew Cushing. Matthew Cushing is the bicycle and pedestrian planner for the Office of Transportation and Mobility from Vanderbilt University. Welcome, Matthew. Next is Kobe Langner, Community Engagement Specialist at Nashville Department of Transportation. From the Dallas area, we have Dee Leggett, who serves as the Executive Vice President and Chief Development Officer for the Development Department at Dallas Area Rapid Transit, aka DART. Thank you, Dee. And last but certainly not least, we have Meredith Montgomery, who serves as the Executive Director of Walk Bike Nashville here in the Nashville area. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for your time. I'm going to be asking some questions, and if you give as much background as you like, but keep your responses as brief as possible so we can hear from everyone. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Dee, this first question is for you. You are a welcomed guest from outside the Nashville area. We're really excited to hear more about the Dallas communities. If you could briefly provide an overview of your position and how your agency delivers multimodal projects in an equitable manner.
Sure. So I'm a native Tennessean, so I feel like this is kind of like me coming home without having to do the 9-hour drive back home. So great to see fellow Tennesseans. Also glad to be on the UPT board of advisors. But yeah, at DART, all project planning, project delivery kind of rolls up into the development department, which I oversee, and that includes, making service planning decisions, figuring out where we're going to do our next series of capital expansions. Then now we're transitioning more from a system of expansion to a system of modernization. So buying fleet, improving our transit centers, and transitioning those to mobility hubs. So that's kind of the scope of my work. But we're really focusing now on more than just being a provider of buses and trains, looking at what our role is in active transportation, looking at how we can make sure that we're considering in planning these types of projects the entire customer journey, which means working with our city transportation departments to fill gaps in our sidewalks. It means working with our transportation departments at our municipalities on traffic signal prioritization. It's working with social service agencies to understand where our passengers need to go before and after they board our equipment. So when we think about multimodal planning, for us, it means more than just what happens when the passenger goes from the stop or the station to the vehicle. It's recognizing that as a public transportation provider in one of the fastest growing regions in the United States, we have a role in making sure that our customer's journey is a pleasant one from the time they leave their house or their office to the time they board our bus, and then the reverse.
Great, thank you, Dee. So it sounds like those last mile trips are just as important as the mile trips. Meredith, being the head of Walk Bike Nashville, I'm sure you have some comments about the last mile trips and pedestrian infrastructure in general. Would you care to go next?
Sure. So I'm Meredith Montgomery, the Executive Director of Walk Bike Nashville. I've been here about 2 years now. Actually originally from Texas. So Dee representing me there. Grew up in Houston. Most recently was on the Gulf Coast in the Mobile Bay area for about 13 years, but stepped into this role 2 years ago. However, Walk Bike Nashville has been around for 25 years. And we've always had the same great mission of working to make Nashville more walkable, bikeable, and livable. And we do that through education, engagement, and advocacy. Currently, our three biggest strategic goals are to work to reduce the tragic pedestrian and cyclist fatalities and serious injuries that are happening in Nashville, as well as build the culture of walking and biking. So I always say we don't want to get to zero fatalities by just everybody stops walking and biking. We want more of that. We want people to feel like that is just a natural mode of transportation to get from point A to point B. And our third strategic goal, which is our biggest and overlaps everything we do, is to advance mobility justice. And we do that by prioritizing those that have the most to gain from our work, and from addressing I'm sorry, I just got a notification I was signed out. So addressing the inequities that exist in our transportation system, and meeting people where they are to make sure that we are prioritizing their needs, since they have the most to gain.
Great response. Thank you very much, Meredith. Kobe, how about you from the representing NDOT?
Yeah, so I'm the community engagement specialist at the Nashville Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure. I'm just going to call it NDOT from here on out because it's a very long name. But my primary objectives right now in this phase are first to create an equitable engagement plan for our team that guides the many engagement projects and work that we're doing across all the programs that we have. Another big part of my role is to build relationships with community organizations and really focus on community-based engagement and using our great nonprofits and community leaders as liaisons to our team to help us know what are the needs of the communities that we're working in and how can we best meet those in the projects that we have.
Thank you, Kobe. Matthew from the Vanderbilt University side and engaging students, tell us about it.
Hi, yeah, happy to. So as mentioned, the bicycle and pedestrian planner on our transportation and mobility team. So broadly, our team has an interesting focus because we have a very day-to-day focus as well as a long-term planning focus. So we definitely try to get people to and from campus on a day-to-day basis through various transportation modes, but are also looking to the future of infrastructure and programs. Our team is kind of nestled between our parking and facilities teams, and we coordinate really just depending on the needs of that day and that project. So some of these, again, are long-term planning around facility needs, but some of these are daily consultation, like if we have construction projects, how do we detour people around them in a reasonable way? Also, there's education and encouragement components. We have a transportation demand management function, so we try to nudge people towards making kind of sustainable commute decisions that align with our institutional goals. And there are even some operational functions. We have a nighttime shuttle service that's a transit operation and some parking operations that we participate in. In terms of delivery of facilities and infrastructure projects, our goals are really tied to our campus-wide goals. So we usually don't have just standalone transportation projects. We usually do them as we're updating neighborhoods in an area. So as an example, we'll probably get into, but like our West End neighborhood, we took out a bunch of roads and put in a nice some pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure that really changed the neighborhood. And that's part of whole neighborhood-wide planning that we're doing on our campus.
Very good. Thank you, Matthew. Quick reminder to all of our audience members, feel free to put your questions in the chat box and we can bring them up to our panelists. Thank you all for those introductions. I feel like we've got some good ground now and we can kind of dive into some more meaty questions if we could. Dee, perhaps starting back with you, specifically to those projects you were mentioning. I invite you to use one as an example if you need, but this question is about how do you tailor your public outreach based on varying needs of the population you're serving? That can be, limited English proficiency speaking folks, limited mobility, aging populations, things like that. Could you tell us a little bit?
Sure. So I'll talk quickly about two. One, we are procuring new light rail vehicles and new bus vehicles as part of our system modernization. And we really want to focus on the desires of the customers and meeting customer expectations. So as part of that, we started off with doing a survey, making sure that that survey reached a variety of passenger types and passenger groups, was provided in a variety of platforms, variety of languages. We then held numerous focus groups. We had a focus group with the accessibility community. We had a focus group with our Citizens Advisory Committee. We had a focus group with operators and maintainers. We had a focus group with our Hispanic population, with long commuters, some of our minority populations. So we wanted to make sure that we had various levels of engagement. And now, as we've distilled the information, we're now looking at doing some virtual reality to let them kind of see how we've taken their feedback. We're incorporating that into the vehicle design. The other project that I wanted to highlight is one where you've got an alignment that might be under construction, and you think you've got an approach that is largely one size fits all, and recognizing halfway through the project that maybe there's certain areas of the corridor whose needs just are different because of politics, because of economies. You just need to maybe pivot your communications plan. So the Silver Line is a 26-mile commuter rail corridor connecting our suburban communities into DFW International Airport, passes through a largely Jewish community. They are not getting a station stop. They're not supportive of the project. So we, had to tailor a lot of our work conditions and our design to reflect and honor their practices on the Sabbath. But we also had to make sure that the messages, recognizing that their perception of the project was much different than the other 23 miles along the corridor, we had to start really tailoring our outreach to that community. So we did a lot of geofencing in how we kind of targeted our messaging to this community versus other portions of the corridor to make sure that we were maybe attacking a lot of the misinformation that was circulating in so the various social media platforms in this specific neighborhood. We then started having more active public meetings with them. We went from quarterly meetings to monthly meetings. We then went from monthly meetings to making sure that we were having meetings with the various synagogues to make sure that, again, we're getting and dealing with the issues face to face and not letting misinformation percolate as much as it was. They were going onto these social media chat platforms, and you had this kind of echo chamber that was being created of misinformation. So we really had to spend a very focused effort on kind of treating this 3-mile section of a 26-mile corridor vastly different from a public involvement perspective, but it's starting to pay off, and we're starting to be able to get some advancements, change some of the public sentiment in this area.
Those are some great examples. I think we would love to hear more about how it's going, maybe later on in the talk. Meredith, I'm sure a lot of projects are aimed at some of our more diverse communities. How is the dealings with Walk Back Nashville approaching those issues and delivering what we need to those communities?
Yeah, we've just learned how important it is to meet people where they are. So I feel like the default is to schedule a community meeting, do some social posts, put surveys out. But what we found is when we do that, we're typically attracting people that are already engaged, or people that are online, or people that have the flexibility to show up at those meetings. When we do our work, we really target the geographical area that we are focused on. So a lot of times we'll work around a school community or neighborhood. A good example is the corridor that we're tackling on Dickerson Pike. If you're not local, Dickerson Pike is one of the most dangerous corridors in our state, especially for pedestrians. And so we've been doing various work on that corridor to produce a pedestrian safety plan that we put out last year, or it came out right at the beginning of this year, but we have been working on that for over a year. And what we found is we can put out surveys and we can get great feedback from the surveys, but the most meaningful conversations that we're having are literal conversations. So, it's a 1.5 mile stretch of Dickerson, going out there and spending several hours and asking people that are walking, that are biking, that are taking the bus, that are even in their cars, on their way in and out of the grocery store. Hey, can I ask you a couple questions? And still utilizing that survey. So we're asking the same questions every time, but you'll get the more insight into the answers that they're giving you. So a great example is we were out there surveying, and I couldn't believe how many people were saying, one of the questions was, do you feel safe walking along Dickerson Pike? And a lot of people, yeah, it's fine. And then it'd say, do you feel, how hard is it to cross? Is it difficult to cross Dickerson Pike? And then they're getting more comfortable. And a lot of times it was, yeah, because I know how to. I know that I might have to wait. I have to be patient. I have to be waiting 20 minutes. I have to look for the cars because nobody's looking for me. And so he's like, it's pretty simple for me, but for a mom with kids, I fear for their lives. And if they've got arms full of groceries, and they start naming all of these barriers and these things that should not represent safety and ease of crossing. It's just a way of life that they've accepted. So therefore, if we would have just put that survey out and we're getting these responses that people are saying they feel safe and they can cross Dickerson, okay, it's a lot more meaningful to hear the story behind that and the actual lived experience.
I totally understand what you mean. Kobe, from NDOT's perspective, are corridors like Dickerson Pike and similar ones on your radar as well?
They are definitely on our radar as part of our Vision Zero action plan, which we released in 2021. Meredith's right, that's one of the most dangerous roads in Tennessee, and one that we have been working closely with Walk Bike Nashville on implementing some solutions, on doing outreach. And I completely agree too with everything Meredith said about outreach. There's no one formula that's going to work for every project or for every community. And I think I have to acknowledge, and we have to acknowledge as a government agency, there's also some built-in barriers to NDOT leading the conversation and leading engagement in a lot of communities. There is some very well-grounded distrust of government officials and government agencies, which is why we try to take the community's lead as much as possible and lead on community partners like Walk Bike Nashville that have been leading the charge on Dickerson Pike for a long time and have been having those conversations and spearheading projects. I see Eric's here with Civic Design Center, like another great example of a local organization that they have a whole website full of a lot of great ideas and resources. So for us, one program that I'm excited to expand is tactical urbanism. And I think with the tactical urbanism program, which we're making it accessible for anyone to apply and eventually get funding to implement a lot of these changes in their community, that's shifting the power dynamics to where the community can lead the charge on the types of projects that they want to see in their area, and let us know how we can support them. A lot of times it is very formulaic. There's a survey that goes out, we do social posts, there's a public meeting. And I'm really hoping to kind of re-envision that approach. Another example with the aging population, we're working with AARP on neighborhoods that have a higher proportion of people who are aging, like Inglewood and Bordeaux, and working closely with them on age-friendly transportation mobility projects to help our team better understand, like, how do we design multimodal projects with the aging community in mind. And overall, I think a huge asset for Nashville is we have so many organizations who are out there building relationships. They already have the trust in place with these communities, and we can follow their lead on what works best for the communities that we're targeting.
That's great, Kobe. It sounds like community partnerships are really what we need here. In light of that, Matthew, how much is Vanderbilt liking being a community partner in these ways? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I'll touch a little bit on the external and the internal side. I mean, I'll say definitely the external partnerships. I mean, we impact the city broadly and the transportation that moves through it and around it. And we've been having to have lots of conversations with some of our large construction projects as they impact traffic flow to the surrounding neighborhoods. But also we have good partnerships with agencies like the ones we've talked about today. I mean, Kobe and I have looked at plans together, trying to get feedback from Vanderbilt on some of the infrastructure that we is going in the area near us. I'll say internally, in terms of the kind of the public outreach that we do, that it's kind of an interesting and unique setting to be in a university setting for outreach, because a lot of, like Meredith was saying, meet the people where they are. Well, I mean, you can't get any closer than we are here. I mean, we're at orientations with new faculty, staff, and students. I mean, we have a list of, everyone in our email system is at the university. We have newsletters that we can send out, but we also have established bodies that can help represent the interests to us, like the student government, the faculty senate, the student staff advisory council, things like that. So it's a really nice setting for that. I'll say in terms of kind of actual strategies, I mean, there's always the in-person, the tabling at events, things like that. And one nice thing we can do is, because we have a broad programming, like I'm promoting people biking throughout the year. Sometimes I'm just giving out helmets and bike lights and things like that, helping with route planning. The nice thing about that is it gives me that ability to talk to people about infrastructure without just saying, like, I have this specific project I'm trying to talk to you about today. I can collect feedback throughout the year from commuters who are actually coming and expressing their concerns and their difficulties. And we compare that with things like our Bike to Work Day event this year. We had someone from NDOT out talking about an adjacent project that was happening right where we were tabling in the future. So it's great to be able to actually see that while also having kind of a fun setting. It's nice when you can mix in the outreach with not just an ask, but also something fun that you can include. And then in terms of I mentioned digital data collection, emails, things like that. We definitely do some of that. We have our annual commute survey where we just get a lot of feedback from the community on how they get around. We've started to move towards some ArcGIS data collection tools too, where people can drop pins on a map and say, or draw a line on a map and say, here's where I'm having troubles getting somewhere. We'd like to improve that. Some lessons learned, I'll say quickly on these things. The in-person stuff, it definitely reaches people, but you have to consider schedule. We have kind of obvious breaks in our population. Like faculty sometimes will have different needs than staff will have different needs than students, and even within the staff groups there's going to be some differences. So like we found on our survey that kind of the office workers, quote unquote, we're having an easier time responding to surveys, but like people on our dining teams, for instance, we're not. So we're looking into like doing like focus groups and paper surveys kind of in the future to better catch that. And similarly, scheduling. I mean, some of these groups, they're on campus and we can catch them easily, but like if they're working an overnight shift, are they getting the same ability to interact? So we're strategizing around those all that we can. But those breaks are slightly different than you'll see in a different organization.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. It sounds like a really dynamic engagement strategy that needs to get everybody and sometimes promotes its own challenges. Thank you, panelists. Good stopping point. We actually have a question in the chat box. This one is for Dee. I'll put you on the spot here, Dee. This question is from Eric. We've seen regional transit ridership fall off here in Nashville since COVID. Do you foresee challenges with ridership supporting the 26 miles of the Silver Line project's more suburban areas?
Great question. And yes, I mean, the project was, largely designed in 2019, well before we knew well before we knew about COVID, and definitely well before we knew about COVID's impact to riders, especially commuter rail riders, which is what typically, you look at when you're building a regional rail system, is typically focused on peak periods. And what we're seeing as riders return on our network is that riders are returning throughout the day, and we don't have sharp peaks in the mornings and the afternoons. We recognize that the corridor that we're building in, while it is largely suburban, there are pockets of urban centers. Similar to Nashville, you've got urban job centers that are popping up in the exurbs, like Brentwood, right? Brentwood in Nashville has its own kind of employment base. Plano, Addison have a large employment population, or large importer of jobs from other regional areas. And then obviously DFW is a large job center that requires people to be in person, especially with TSA. So, we anticipate that our ridership is not going to build as quickly as we thought it was going to be build, because we're not going to have the peak period ridership that we anticipated when we planned the program, but we still believe that it's going to have significant value from a mobility perspective to the region, because it's connecting some key employment centers. We're also building a complementary 26-mile hike and bike trail in the corridor. So it's one of those things where not only are we delivering commuter rail, we're delivering an active transportation mode that's going to connect 10 communities and provide some connectivity that didn't exist. So, when you talk about, I think one of the key messages for public transportation coming out of COVID is we got to talk about mobility outcomes beyond just ridership. We are here to provide mobility. We're also here to provide economic value, build communities, create placemaking opportunities. So I think there's an opportunity post-COVID for transit professionals to talk more about what our outcomes are beyond just ridership.
Great answer. Thank you, Dee. And thank you, Eric, for that question. If you have follow-up questions, quick reminder, put those in the chat box, just like Eric did. And Eric has a follow-up question. Is the hike and bike trail part of the Silver Line, or is it a separate project? Dee, back.
Oh man, I could talk all day about the politics behind it, that answer. So if you want to reach out to me, I'll give you the backstory. So technically speaking, they are two separate projects. DART is in full control of the Silver Line, but we have to work with our cities and our Council of Governments on the design, construction, and funding of the hike and bike trail. DART, the hike and bike trail, is $100+ million project being delivered in 3 phases. DART is only contributing about 5 million of that 100 million. Everything else is coming from city, regional, state, or federal grants. We are just delivering the project on behalf of the cities and the Council of Governments.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dee. So moving along with some of our questions that we've had beforehand, folks know we're in the middle rather of our Nashville local election. I'm curious, and of course, Dee, you can speak about the Dallas elections generally too, please. We invite you to do that. But I would ask maybe Meredith first, in light of Nashville's upcoming election, one that's ongoing now, I think we're still in the runoff. What should residents interested in transportation and equity be looking out for when they go to the polls? You can speak about this recent one or about an old one we'd had, or just generally, however you like.
Sure. So, I would love to say pick the candidates that are speaking the most about walkability and bikeability, but it's so much bigger than that. I think what's really important and what's going to help move the city forward is thinking about issues more holistically, and the interconnectedness of, say, transportation and affordable housing. We know that I just saw the stat earlier this week, that the average cost of car ownership is something like $13,000 a year. So if you go in and build affordable housing on a corridor, but there's not accessibility, multimodal accessibility to that housing, and you're required to own a car, suddenly the affordability of that is a lot less. Conversely, if you go in and build this beautiful multimodal corridor, if we put we just have the 12th South bike lanes that were built in Nashville, if we put that everywhere without consideration to the bigger scope of our community, then we're probably going to face a lot of gentrification and people that are going to be priced out of living there if they're living there now and not being able to enjoy the improvements that come along. So I just think that we can't continue to look at these as single issues, and we need to address them as a whole, and we got to take our blinders off, and we need to get multiple people, multiple departments in the room at the same time so that we can be more effective in how we address these. And I think I just heard recently that in Austin's public transportation plan, they had a huge budget line item for anti-displacement initiatives. So being proactive, and as we get funding and as we move forward in initiatives that need to happen, we need to anticipate the potential results of these actions and be prepared to make sure that we're working for everybody.
Thanks, Meredith. And thank you for not endorsing. We're not here to endorse any candidates, but we are speaking generally about transportation and equity on the minds of Nashvilleians. Thank you. Kobe, from NDOT's perspective, similar thoughts, or how could you elaborate?
Yeah, and since Meredith didn't plug this resource, I'll do it for them. Walk Bike Nashville does have a great resource interviewing many of the candidates, including the mayoral candidates and some of the at-large candidates that are running in the runoff. And I found that to be a helpful resource personally. And I think beyond that, for NDOT especially, one of the biggest barriers to us achieving this multimodal vision for Nashville, and we're a very new department. We were born 2 years ago. So we have a long road ahead of us. We have 1,800 miles in our priority sidewalk network, and sidewalks are not cheap to build. And that's just sidewalks, not to mention all the other transportation priorities with transit and otherwise. What I think would be what is essential for us in building a transportation system that is accessible, inclusive, equitable of all modes of transportation is getting that robust funding that we need to fund this future. So not every candidate on the ballot has a voting record, but if they do have a voting record, I would recommend checking those receipts and seeing if they have a history of funding transportation projects. If so, what types of transportation projects are they funding, or what are they advocating for in their circles of influence? I think that does give you a sense of what their priorities are, and if an inclusive multimodal transportation system is part of that vision or not.
Thanks, Kobe. Folks, we've had some links being shared in the chat box. Make sure you check those out to continue the conversation while you're listening. Thank you very much. Matthew, from the university's perspective, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, and I'll take it almost to my personal perspective. I'm a little hesitant to give political advice, but I'll say that the things that I'm kind of looking for, and I'd recommend others be looking for, one, are any of the proposals around transportation specific? I mean, it's very popular. I think in Nashville, it's very common to know that we need to be talking about our transportation network. Now, everyone's talking about it. Now, who's talking about it specifically? Also, what types of language are they using? Like if we're mostly talking about congestion, that's different than talking about sidewalks and transit, or it can be. Sometimes that just means, hey, let's widen every road to solve congestion. And personally, I don't think that's a good solution. But those are the types of things I'm listening for. Otherwise, I mean, like Kobe was saying, is there any history here? Is there anything we can look at? What have they funded, or have they encouraged people to do? Or is it something that they're just picking up because it is politically viable? Those are the things that I'm looking for. Hopefully that's helpful to others.
It sure is. Thank you, Matthew. Dee, perhaps the last word for you regarding local elections generally.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, you want to make sure they're talking about it, right? They're talking about transportation, and they're talking about transportation in a variety of modes, not just highways. Texas and Tennessee are so similar in terms of politics and development patterns. And then I think Matthew's points are great. Like, not only are they talking about it, do they have real meat to what they're saying and authenticity to what they're saying? I mean, so many people pick up sound bites or chase the latest, greatest thing. Like here, there's conversations about some gondolas, and I'm like, seriously, we're gonna like spend political capital on gondolas, but we're not going to focus on providing really solid bus service. So, it's one, make sure they're talking about it, and two, making sure what they say is meaningful, authentic, and realistic.
That's some great advice. I think we would agree with a lot of that. Thank you, Dee. Along this might be more tailored to our public agency representatives, but Justice 40 and initiatives that provide more equitable services in the bill and the presidential administration's bill. Could you speak a little bit about how initiatives that plan for these sort of projects keep those in mind, and maybe we can open up with the definition of a Justice 40 project as you know it. Kobe, perhaps being from NDOT. You could open with a little on that.
Sure, yeah, and I would say from an engagement perspective alone, Justice 40 is a very helpful resource. Before planning any engagement or outreach, I pull up the map and look at that area and see if it is defined in Justice 40's terms as a disadvantaged areas, and more importantly, why? Like, what are the factors that are preventing challenges or barriers to this neighborhood? And how do we keep that front of mind in how we plan engagements and in what community organizations we reach out to? If we see that there's a language barrier, we need to prepare to have translators at our events, work with organizations that are liaisons for those constituents. But in terms of getting projects that are federally funded, almost every one of the projects we apply for federal funding for are 100% in Justice 40 areas. A lot of the projects we apply for are Vision Zero projects, and equity is forefront to our Vision Zero action plan. So the big one right now that we're really crossing our fingers for is the Nolensville Pike Vision Zero grant funding that we have applied for. We applied for it last year, didn't get it then, but got some really helpful feedback. But the South Nashville and Nolensville Pike area down by Harding is a great example of an area that has historically been underfunded. As you'll see with Vision Zero, there are some barriers that the community there is experiencing, especially around mobility and how that impacts job access, healthcare access, housing access, et cetera. So we do keep Justice 40 and that equity lens in mind with all of our projects, and especially those where we're seeking federal funding.
Yeah, thank you, Kobe. And just for reference, we have a link in the chat that gives you more information about Justice 40 initiatives generally, if you'd like to check that out. Meredith, from Walk Bike Nashville's perspective, your thoughts on Justice 40 generally for your project implementation?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say mobility, justice, and equity, it's a lens that we apply to the majority of our work. I think a lot of times, for the general public, if you look at our socials, people may know us most for our big events toward an Ash and open streets and our educational events that are community wide. But if you kind of get to know us and you see our work, what we're investing the most time and resources in is our community engagement work in our more vulnerable parts of town. So like our focus schools, we pick a handful of those each year. Those are always high needs schools. We tend to focus our neighborhood work and corridor work along the high injury network. We've known for years the data that was reinforced with our local Vision Zero action plan that the crashes and the severe injuries and fatalities, they're not equitably distributed. So 90% of high injury intersections actually occur in our vulnerable communities. So just always trying to put as much of our resources and time investing into those communities, because that if we can fix those areas, we can have the greatest impact.
Thanks, Meredith. Matthew, your thoughts from the university side on equity and Justice 40?
Yeah, I'll touch that. I'll say, I think you're right that this is probably a little more directly relevant to some of the municipal agencies or government agencies, but I am happy to touch this here a little bit still, given even with our smaller geographic focus. So, I mean, the equity impact is especially what we'll talk about. We definitely do have kind of our broader goals are to shift commuter patterns. So a lot of the kind of environmental impact stuff that's going to come up here is just part of our daily function. We are trying to nudge people towards kind of modes that are more sustainable. But that tension I mentioned before about kind of different groups within the community, that is something that we talk about a lot here, and there's some really interesting impacts. Like generally speaking, as someone who promotes bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, I usually think of those as kind of great equalizing modes anyways, but we actually get a lot of feedback from our community that by promoting bicycle and pedestrian projects, for instance, we're prioritizing our more privileged parts of our community because practically speaking, like broadly, if I'm painting broad strokes, our faculty tend to be paid higher and live closer to campus, and our staff tend to live further out, and they have fewer options for alternative transportation than kind of driving alone. So we do think about those things, and as we're kind of suggesting new programs, but I mean, a really tangible aspect is like our annual parking program based on your salary band will depend exactly kind of what your parking costs are, and it actually is supposed to help equalize that a little bit. But it's a hard problem to solve because generally speaking, it's not normal to hear that these are for the privileged.
Yeah, some great points there, Matthew. Thanks for that. Dee from the Dallas community, similar thoughts, different?
Yeah, sure. So, and I'll drop some information in the chat about our program. We actually have created a program focused on looking at our next series of capital projects through a Justice 40 lens. It's called Mobility Plus. Like Kobe, we recognize that a lot of the majority of the capital projects that we're delivering moving forward are being delivered in our Justice 40 communities. So we want to make sure that right out of the gate, we're looking at those with a Justice 40 lens to make sure that we're maximizing the outcomes of those investments. A good example is, I think it's 8 out of 9 of our bus transit centers sit in Justice 40 communities. A lot of those, the need of those changed post-COVID because ridership patterns changed. We didn't really staff them during COVID. So we're now looking at transitioning from transit centers to mobility hubs. So let us engage with these Justice 40 communities to figure out what different concepts and mobility connections need to be established in these mobility hubs. There's also a significant technology gap in the southern section of Dallas, which is primarily where a lot of our Justice 40 communities sit. So as we're building these mobility hubs, can these be amplifiers to provide high-speed internet access or wireless access to our communities? We know that a lot of our Justice 40 communities, the only way they get internet access is through smartphones. They don't have it at their home. So can we leverage our investment in these communities to make sure that we're maximizing the outcomes for the community? And then I think the other way we're doing it goes back to understanding the customer journey. While there may be opportunities to invest in areas outside of the Justice 40 community, if we understand how our customers in Justice 40 communities travel on our system, how they get from South Dallas to jobs in Addison, and making sure that any investment in Addison benefits those that are accessing those jobs out of Justice 40 communities. So it's making sure that not only are we investing in Justice 40 communities, but we're also making sure that any future investments outside of those communities provide them with adequate access to high-paying jobs.
Great, thank you, Dee. And Dee has been so gracious to put links to the things that she's been talking about in the chat box, so please check those out. Thank you all for those responses. If you're just hopping on, we're talking with leaders in our Nashville and Dallas communities about multimodal projects and ways we can engage the public to make them more equitable and serve more of our community members that need it most. This next question talks a little bit about what communities across the nation, what agencies outside of your own are doing some work that have really caught your eye. We have great representation on the call here, but I'm wondering if anything comes to mind about some agencies or projects that you've seen in the news or that you've seen maybe on a vacation or something that really check a lot of boxes for you and your agency goals. Perhaps we could start with that back to you, Meredith, if there are things on the radar in that way.
I'm having to pick my brain for a second. I'll just the immediate thing that came out to mind, just an intervention I hadn't seen was when we were in, and this is not community engagement, but just a different approach was where were we? We were in South Florida this summer, and to see us for the first time I'd seen in a high pedestrian traffic area at a roundabout, they actually had the hawk signals. So the pedestrian red lights, which I hadn't seen before, brought that up to NDOT's. I don't think that Director Alicon had seen that either. So yeah, I love to get new ideas, but also, I'm not formally trained in planning or transportation. I came into this because my lived experience, I started walking and biking to school every day with my kids. And so I love to approach, when we see an issue and we know, okay, we can't build a sidewalk overnight, what are some creative ideas that we have? And so, yes, looking outside of our local community, but just as a user, when you're out walking in an unsafe area, just think, what are the holes? What could make me feel safer? I know when we were on Dickerson Pike, even when there were just cones out, it just felt a little bit safer knowing that having that visual barrier between us and the cars. And so that's something we've been exploring, is when we don't think that we can afford to wait for a full sidewalk project in, maybe it's paint, partnering with Civic Design Center and DOC and other entities to do basically a painted mural as a walking path in place of a sidewalk. I'd love to see if we could explore using the delineators that we use for bike lanes as just a vertical barrier between where pedestrians are and where the cars are. And knowing that, yes, if a car can still drive through it, it's not armor for us, but it's a lot better than having nothing.
Thanks, Meredith. That's a great response. If I could ask Eric on the call or one of our board members to put in the chat box more information about hawk signals for our listeners, that could be great. Matthew, are there other universities in our immediate area or beyond that do some great work too?
Yeah, I'm also kind of picking my brain for tangible examples. But yes, I mean, there definitely are.
We can come back to you, of course. It's a tough question, but I thought it could be really interesting for our listeners. Kobe or Dee, would anyone like to jump in?
Kobe, you want me to go?
Okay.
So you guys benefit. I just actually got back from an APTA study mission in Australia. So I spent 3 weeks in New Zealand and Australia studying 4 different cities: Auckland, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Sydney. So that's my inspiration of the moment is getting past the jet lag and thinking about all the lessons learned. But I think there's 2 that would be interesting from kind of a public involvement perspective. One was Crosstown Rail in Brisbane. The guy that kind of walked us through the project was their public engagement lead, and he really talked about how intentional they were about creating interactive and immersive public engagement opportunities. I'll have to see if I can find some links to send you guys, but they created this experience center around the project and allowed, all ages to come in and experience different types of projects. Now, this is a massive multi-billion-dollar tunneling project in Australia. So it's big. And so their ability to kind of upscale what they're doing from a public involvement perspective is really fun. But they use gaming to teach lessons about the project. They use virtual reality to provide visibility to project progress, because a lot of it's in the tunnel and you can't take people down into the tunnel. But it was able to build excitement and keep that excitement maintained throughout the projects. And so I think there's a lot of lessons learned from what they're doing, and you can scale it up or down based on your project to figure out how do you create more immersive opportunities to engage public, especially when you're thinking about young adults and getting them really involved in transportation planning at an early age. The second one was Sydney. Sydney is going through what they're calling the 3-city concept, and it's very intentional land use planning to create 3 cities within kind of the broader Sydney region. Sydney obviously is the main hub of the region, but then you've got an aerotropolis being created around the airport, and how you intentionally do placemaking and transportation and how you engage the local communities and deciding what that's going to become. And then Parramatta is kind of more of a central suburb that they're intentionally expanding light rail. They're doing hike and bike trails. They're creating investments that honor the heritage of the community, there's a river, the Parramatta River flows through this area. So they've done a lot of work to kind of blend the modern with recognizing the history and, the First Nation people that were there when Sydney was colonized. So those were the 2 that first came to mind, but it was a great trip. So if you ever want to go to Australia, there's plenty of really good examples of transportation done right. We got to hear from the Lord Mayor in Brisbane, and he actually bragged about how they are spending more money on public and active transportation than they are on highways. And if that is ever said in the state of Tennessee or the state of Texas, I want to be in the room when it happens. So
great examples. Projects of scale definitely worth talking about and sharing. Thank you. Sounds like an awesome trip. Kobe, follow-up responses or thoughts?
Yeah, one that is just coming to mind actually, because Meredith mentioned taking her kids to school by walking and biking. There are a lot of great Safe Routes to Schools programs across the country. A couple I'm familiar with are at the Portland Bureau of Transportation. The state of Denver has a program, but there's a bunch of them across the country. And I will say Walk Bike is also doing this as well on a scale, but I'm excited that NDOT is now embracing Safe Routes to School and is looking towards these other agencies with how to implement this. It's very top of mind right now with schools starting back, and we're working with Walk Bike on planning Bike to School Day and Walk to School Day. And I think the conversation with us is how can every day be a safe walking and biking to school day? Like, how do we make this safe for students who may, for example, live in the radius around the school where they can't take this school bus, and getting a ride is not an option, so they have to walk to school, or the school bus drops them off at a location in their neighborhood that still doesn't feel safe to walk to their home or where they need to go. This is part of our Vision Zero action plan, launching this initiative on Safe Routes to School. And I think we've really benefited from seeing how other agencies like Portland and Colorado and Denver have had successful programs.
That's great. Thank you, Kobe. Very insightful. Everyone, we're 9 minutes till here. I'd like to close us out with one of our favorite questions that we like to bring up at our webinars for YPT, and that is a question for our young planners and maybe students on the call. If you have advice or things that they can look out for, or things that inspired you when you were in their position, that can lead them into learning more or networking. Maybe it was a trip to Australia, or maybe it was an experience being walked to school when you were a kid, something like that. We'd invite you to share an anecdote or a story or project that could help them learn more. And a reminder to everyone, this will be recorded and made available to everyone who's interested, as well as the contact information for our panelists. I don't think I told our panelists we'd be sharing their contact information, but don't worry, it shouldn't be too bad. So Meredith, perhaps we start back with you. For the students and young planners on the call interested in a career like yours, what would you say?
All right, almost didn't unmute. Yeah, like I said, I kind of meandered my way into this career. And so for that reason, I would just encourage everybody to, become an advocate themselves. If you're interested in multimodal transportation, make sure you're doing it regularly. That's the best way to, see the holes, to see how decisions are made. I started, like I said, walking and biking with my kids, and then I tell the story that our local public works office got tired of hearing from me, and they said, we've got a committee for that. It's called the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Council. Go talk to them. I bugged them enough to chair that committee for a while. And so that's where I learned, okay, this is why things don't happen overnight. And this is the chain of command that you need to go through. These are the relationships you need to build, the conversations you need to have. And at the same time, just leaning not too heavily on what's in the books and what's been done, because we're not going to, I don't want us to wait another lifetime or multiple lifetimes to see the sidewalks built that we need built in Nashville. And if we keep on the same path that we've been on, that's what's going to happen. So we've got to start thinking outside the box. And then my last tidbit, what I've been leaning on a lot lately, is just action is so important. Don't be afraid to try things. We get so hung up in surveys and planning and having conversations, and we've seen the community respond so positively when we put ourselves out there and we take a risk and we do something short-term, less expensive, give it a try. We know it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to do it and take the chance. And from that, when we don't get it right, that's when we learn the best lessons. So just being willing to take risks. It was I think the walking and biking manager in Memphis who said, loved it, his quote was, to show people that we invest are truly invested in safety, we have to be willing to try things. So that's what I would share.
Great ideas. I agree with all that personally there, Mary. Thank you. Matthew, how about you?
Yeah, and this question is near and dear to my heart because I'll say I got into planning kind of late in my career, I would say, in a certain way. Like I was getting a master's in philosophy, studying language, just biking around on my own time, and had an interest. I mean, I'll mimic some of what Meredith said, but some of it is just showing up. Being here is in the right direction, but sometimes it's hard to identify where to show up. So I mean, like I didn't realize until pretty late that like there's such a thing as an MPO, a metropolitan planning organization, that if you're in an urbanized area, you probably have, well, you definitely have, federally it's required. And like you can look at the documents like the Transportation Improvement Program to see the plans for pretty much all of the transportation funding that's going to be spent in the next 3 years. And you can look out further into comprehensive plans. Like BPACs, like Meredith was talking about, are a good place to go. I mean, when I was poking around at the edges trying to get in, I was showing up at BPAC, eventually got appointed as a committee member in one in Miami, just by poking around and showing up and asking questions. Otherwise, I mean, obviously it's great to get a formal education, but if you don't have that and you do want to break in a little further, supplementing with a little bit of extra education helps. Like I did some like night classes in GIS, so I can geographic information systems, so I can do some kind of mapping analysis and map creation. It's something that really helped me break into the field, and it may not require as significant of an investment of time as a full planning degree.
Those are great tips, Matthew. I've done a few of those myself. Hopefully folks on the call can relate. Kobe, how about you?
But one specific thing that comes to mind is there are a lot of great initiatives in Nashville for students to get involved with the conversation, specifically around transportation. So I had the opportunity to speak to the Oasis Center's Transit Youth Action Team, which is a group of high school students who are just so passionate and bright around the conversation with transportation. Applying for groups like that, to where you actually are in a position where you do have power. Students have power and influence on our city. It was because of that group of high school students that any student in Nashville can ride the bus for free. That was their doing and implementing that policy. Government officials, like, it may seem hard to reach us, but we are listening. Some of us are. I'm listening. And I would say, again, like kind of emphasizing other themes, like just get out there and do something. Like start with what you can see, start with what's around you, start with your experience, get involved with those committees when it makes sense. But like we would love to work with you on a tactical urbanism project, for example. But usually the fastest way to get things done is to take it into your hands and with a permit from NDOT, go out and add paint to the road or add low cost improvements that make it safer in your neighborhood or around your school to get where you're going. So I think that kind of experiential action is a great way to get started. And also pursuing those organizations that do offer opportunities for more influence over officials.
That's great, Kobe. Dee, if you could round us out with your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So one of the best advice I ever received in my career is if the chair is empty, sit in the seat. And so what I always kind of tell young people, especially females getting into the industry, is don't just sit in the seat, like claim it. Like don't worry about imposter syndrome, get in that seat and show up and continue showing up and be your best self. The way I got into transportation planning was actually when I was still in Tennessee. I was doing marketing communications for a public engagement, public outreach firm. And we got a contract with the Tennessee Department of Transportation to do public involvement for their statewide multimodal plan. And my boss hadn't kind of figured out who was going to be the project manager. And I was a little bit of a public policy nerd, not necessarily transportation, but I loved public policy. So I was like, I'll do it. Tennessee's a beautiful state. I get to travel to all the counties. I get to talk to all the people about all different kinds of modes. And so that's actually how I got into transportation. I just literally raised my hand and said, I think I can do it. And then I will figure out the rest. And from there, I moved from public engagement to translating for engineers and figuring out how to deliver public projects to now managing a group of engineers and delivering multi-billion-dollar projects. But it all started by sitting in an empty seat and owning it and doing the best that I could, making mistakes, learning from those mistakes. And I think the other advice that I always give people that seems simple, but is often hard, is nurture your network. This is a very small industry when you think about transportation, and you're going to cross paths with these people multiple times in your career. And you need to make sure that, one, you're not burning any bridges, and two, that you're maintaining those relationships over the course of your career.
Ditto all of that. Great response. Thank you, Dee. We still need to all manage our networks and nurture all of our relationships. That is one of the goals of YPT. If I could just put a plug for our group and round us out here, we're right at the top of the hour. If you like what you heard today and you want to learn more, or you want to connect more with our professionals or other networks, maybe, do get involved with organizations like Young Professionals in Transportation. We're not the only ones. There's plenty for planners. Look at your state planning chapter, your design state planning chapter, your engineering chapter. We do have an upcoming event next. It's in October with Tennessee State University. We are trying to nurture a relationship with the students there in their urban affairs program, with really some bright staff and some bright students there. Be on the lookout for an in-person event coming up in October. If you want to connect more with our speakers today, we can get you their contact information. Go ahead and just be prepared to Google the agencies, because we know you'll probably use Google anyway. Google YPT, and we can connect you with them and connect you with the recording today, and as well as our other resources that we have available. We are one pass, so I want to give everybody back their day. Really want to say thank you personally to our speakers and all of you for attending. Young Professionals in Transportation is we're always trying to get better. We always want to hear what our members want to hear more about. So please get in touch with us, get in touch with your friends and your young folks that you know, to get them involved early. We want to get everybody the job that they want one day, and to be civically minded, engaged in what they do. Always very important. So with that, I'll say thank you to everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.